Imagine a sweltering summer day in 1986 in Sichuan province, China. The air is heavy with humidity, and the sound of cicadas is deafening. Local workers at a brickyard in a small, unremarkable area called Sanxingdui are going about their usual business, digging for clay to feed the kills. It is backbreaking, repetitive work. No one expects anything out of the ordinary until the shovel of one worker strikes something hard and metallic deep in the red earth. At first, they think it's a discarded piece of farm equipment or perhaps an old iron pot. But as they begin to clear away the packed soil, a pair of giant, protruding bronze eyes stares back at them from across 3 millennia. This is not just a mask. It is a face that looks like no human being that has ever lived in that era. Not in China, not anywhere on Earth. In that moment, the workers had no way of knowing they had just opened the door to a chapter of human history that is so strange, so technologically advanced, and so wrong, according to the history books, that the academic world would spend the next 4 decades trying to explain it away. This was the beginning of the Sanxingdui mystery, an archaeological anomaly that forces us to question everything we thought we knew about the origins of civilization. What archaeologists eventually pulled from 2 massive sacrificial pits shocked the scientific world to its core. Before them lay hundreds of items, giant bronze trees standing nearly 4 meters tall, exquisite gold scepters engraved with fish and birds, and, most hauntingly, dozens of bronze heads and masks with features that can only be described as alien. Enormous ears that look like wings, wide, slit-like mouths frozen in eerie smiles, and incredible telescopic eyes that protrude from the sockets by several inches. These artifacts date back to the 12th and 11th centuries BC, the era of the Shang Dynasty, but they share absolutely nothing with Shang culture. While the rest of China was creating ritual vessels with intricate geometric patterns and early calligraphy, the masters of Sanxingdui were casting giant anthropomorphic figures whose scale and detail were centuries ahead of their time. The problem with Sanxingdui isn't just the aesthetic, it's that this civilization has no roots. Archaeologists have found no evidence of a gradual evolution for this style. This level of metallurgy and this unique artistic vision appeared out of nowhere, flourished in complete isolation for a few hundred years, and then vanished as suddenly as it arrived, leaving behind not a single line of text, not a single name of a king, a god, or a city. When you look at these masks, you feel an immediate sense of discomfort. Why the eyes? Why would a culture dedicate tons of precious bronze, a material more valuable than gold at the time, to create faces with eyes that look like mechanical tubes? Mainstream scholars try to explain this through mythology, suggesting these are depictions of a legendary ancestor named Cansong, who was said to have protruding eyes. But this explanation feels like a desperate attempt to fit a square peg into a round hole. Why would an entire civilization spend its total industrial output on creating faces that look like they arrived from deep space or another dimension? The technical aspect is even more baffling. Analysis of the bronze has shown a unique chemical signature, a specific alloy of copper, tin, and lead with traces of barium, which was not used in the rest of China. They mastered the lost wax casting technique on a scale that was thought to be impossible for that period. How did a people with no known writing system organize the complex logistics of mining, smelting, and casting such massive, delicate structures? This isn't just a discovery. It is evidence of a parallel reality that existed in the heart of Asia, one that we knew absolutely nothing about until 40 years ago. The mystery deepens when we look at how these items were found. These weren't accidental losses or standard burials. The artifacts were deliberately broken, burned in massive ritual fires, and then carefully layered into pits. It looks like a grand, ritualistic act of suicide for a culture. It appears as though the people of Sanxingdui chose to delete themselves from history, destroying their most sacred objects before abandoning the site forever. Where did they go? Why did they leave a prosperous, fortified city? The official narrative points to earthquakes or floods that changed the course of the Minjiang River, but that doesn't explain why their unique art and technology didn't show up in neighboring regions afterward. The Sanxingdui style didn't evolve, it evaporated. This is a lost, chapter of history that simply dropped out of the archives because its aesthetic and its methods are too anomalous for the standard historical models we use to explain the rise of China. Many alternative researchers point to the strange similarities between the Sanxingdui masks and images found on the other side of the world, in ancient Sumer and Egypt. The giant eyes as a symbol of omniscience, the elongated ears as a sign of divine hearing. Could there have been a global, perhaps even paleocontact influence that shaped this culture? Or is Sanxingdui proof that there was a high-tech, prehistoric civilization whose knowledge flared up in isolated pockets before being extinguished? Mainstream science is extremely reluctant to discuss these versions, preferring to call Sanxingdui a local anomaly. But the scale of this anomaly is too large to ignore. When we see the 13-foot-tall bronze tree of life, decorated with 9 birds and a dragon crawling down the trunk, we aren't just looking at a religious object. We are looking at a complex cosmological map that rivals the depth of biblical or Vedic texts. But we have no texts. We only have the silent bronze and the cold gold. Think about the implications. If it weren't for that lucky shovel in 1986, we would still believe that ancient China was a monolithic, predictable culture. How many more Sanxingduis are hidden beneath the earth? How many civilizations with alien logic and technology never made it into our textbooks because their remains haven't been found, or because they don't fit the narrative? These bronze giants with their telescope eyes are a challenge to our academic arrogance. They remind us that human history is far more complex than a straight line from primitive to advanced. Our past is likely filled with flashes of incredible knowledge and contact that were later lost, leaving us in the dark. Official science is often afraid to admit the existence of these dropped fragments because they require a total reboot of the historical foundation. But the bronze doesn't lie. And when you look into those protruding eyes, you realize you aren't looking at a primitive tribesman. You are looking at a representative of a world whose secrets we are only beginning to grasp. Let's dive deeper into the specific artifacts that defy explanation. The most famous is the Grand Bronze Standing Man. Standing over 8 feet tall on his pedestal, he is the largest and oldest bronze statue of a human in the world. His hands are frozen in a gesture that clearly suggests he was holding something significant. But what? A giant elephant tusk? A golden scepter? Or something we cannot even conceive of? Look closely at his clothing. It is decorated with incredibly fine patterns of dragons and clouds that look like they were etched with a precision tool, not a hand chisel. His face is that same alien mask, with those wing-like ears. If this was a king, why were his proportions so distorted? Was this a stylistic choice, or were the artists trying to capture the likeness of a being whose physiology was fundamentally different from our own? Some suggest the eyes were actually ancient goggles or optical devices, while others believe they represent the inner eye of a shaman. But the sheer consistency of these features across hundreds of artifacts suggests a reality, not just a metaphor. And what about the metallurgy itself? To cast a 4-meter-high bronze tree requires a melting point of over 1,000 degrees Celsius and a massive, controlled environment. The branches of the tree are thin and delicate, yet they have survived 3,000 years without collapsing under their own weight. This requires a sophisticated understanding of structural engineering and alloy balance. Where were the factories? Where were the trial and error pieces? Usually, archaeology finds the path to greatness, the smaller, cruder versions that lead up to the masterpiece. In Sanxingdui, we find only the masterpieces. It is as if the technology was gifted to them, or they brought it from somewhere else entirely. And then there is the gold. The gold scepter found in the pit is a wooden core wrapped in a thin sheet of hammered gold, decorated with a complex motif of human heads, birds, and fish. The technique used to bond the gold and the precision of the engraving is comparable to the finest work of the Egyptian pharaohs, yet it was created in a supposedly isolated basin in China. The absence of writing is perhaps the biggest mystery of all. By this time in history, the Shang Dynasty was already using oracle bones, turtle shells, and ox blades inscribed with early characters. They had a complex bureaucracy. Sanxingdui had gold, bronze, jade, silk, and a massive walled city, yet not a single scratch of writing has been found. This is statistically impossible for a civilization of this size. How do you manage the logistics of a city of tens of thousands of people, coordinate the mining of tons of copper, and perform complex religious rituals without a record-keeping system? Or, and this is the theory that keeps archaeologists awake, was their writing something we don't recognize? Could it have been encoded in the patterns of their bronze? Or was it recorded on materials that have long since turned to dust? Perhaps they didn't need writing because their method of information transfer was something we haven't even discovered yet. The jade found in the pits is equally baffling. Thousands of jade items, including by discs and sewn tubes, were found. Jade is one of the hardest stones to carve. It requires abrasive sands and thousands of hours of manual labor. Yet, some of the jade pieces at Sanxingdui are only millimeters thick, perfectly polished, and incised with microscopic detail. Modern jewelers have stated that to achieve this level of finish, one would need high-speed rotary tools or diamond-tipped abrasives. How did a Bronze Age culture achieve this? And more importantly, why? Why bury these impossible objects in a hole and set them on fire? The act of sacrificing the artifacts suggests that the value of these items wasn't in their beauty or their utility, but in what they represented. When that representation failed, perhaps due to a perceived abandonment by their gods, the people destroyed the physical evidence of their connection to that higher power. We must also consider the geological isolation of the Sichuan basin. Surrounded by mountains, it was historically difficult to access. This isolation is usually why a culture stays primitive. But in Sanxingdui's case, the isolation seemed to act as a greenhouse for a super-civilization. But was it really isolated? The presence of thousands of elephant tusks in the pits, tusks from elephants that didn't live in that region, suggests a trade network that stretched as far as Southeast Asia or India. This was a global player, a hidden empire that sat at the crossroads of the ancient world, trading in ideas and materials that shouldn't have been moving across the globe yet. The alien dynasty of Sanxingdui forces us to look at the map of the ancient world as a web of high-speed connections, rather than a collection of lonely villages. Why has this story been dropped from the standard history of the world? Because it is inconvenient. It ruins the story of China as a monocentric civilization growing out of the Yellow River Valley. It suggests that there were others who were perhaps more advanced, more strange, and more connected to the mysterious forces of the universe than the founders of the Han culture. For historians, Sanxingdui is a glitch in the matrix. It is easier to treat it as a curious side note than to admit it is a fundamental pillar of our history that we simply don't understand. But for those of us who look at the evidence, those bronze eyes are a call to action. They tell us that we have barely scratched the surface of the human story. We are standing in the shadow of giants, and we are only just beginning to see their outlines in the red clay of Sichuan. The story of Sanxingdui is a reminder that the truth is often stranger than any fiction we could invent. These masks, with their winged ears and telescopic eyes, are not just art. They are a message from a lost branch of the human family, a branch that reached for the stars and achieved a level of sophistication that we are only now starting to appreciate. As we continue to dig, as we find more pits and more artifacts, the wall of official silence will eventually crumble. We will have to accept that our past was filled with alien dynasties and forgotten technologies. Our history is not a closed book. It is a living, breathing mystery that is waiting for us to find the next piece of the puzzle. When you next hear someone say that science has explained everything, think of the silent, bronze faces of Sanxingdui. They have been waiting for 3,000 years for us to be smart enough to ask the right questions. They are the guardians of a secret that we are only just beginning to uncover. The truth is hidden right beneath our feet, and every shovel of earth brings us closer to a reality that will change the way we see ourselves and our place in the universe forever. The alien dynasty was real. They lived, they built, they saw things we can only imagine, and then they chose to leave. But they left us a trail of bronze and gold to follow. It's time we followed it. Narrator, deepen the tone for the conclusion. As the sun sets over the archaeological site of Sanxingdui today, the modern museum stands as a monument to what we don't know. The tourists walk past the glass cases, marveling at the strange faces, but few realize they are looking at a mirror of a forgotten human potential. This is our true history, a history of mystery, of sudden leaps in technology, and of civilizations that existed in a different frequency of reality. We must remain open-minded. We must be willing to let go of the comfortable stories of the past to embrace the mind-bending reality of the present. The alien dynasty is calling to us across the centuries, and it's our responsibility to listen. Thank you for joining us on this investigation into the shadows of the ancient world. If you believe that history is far more than what they tell us in school, and if you want to be part of the community that seeks the truth behind the world's greatest anomalies, then click that subscribe button. We are dedicated to filling in the gaps of our real history, one discovery at a time. Click the bell icon so you never miss a part of the puzzle, and tell us in the comments, do you think the Sanxingdui masks represent humans, gods, or something else entirely? Let's keep the mystery alive and continue our search for the truth together. Until next time, keep looking deeper. The truth is out there, waiting to be found.